which is in the very centre of the affray, cannons planted before their door, and all their windows already smashed. Indeed, nearly all the houses in that quarter are abandoned. We are living here like prisoners in a fortress. The Countess del V e, whose father was shot in a former revolution, had just risen this morning, when a shell entered the wall close by the side of her bed and burst in the mattress. As there are two sides to every story, listen to the proclamation of the chief of the rebels. Señor Valentin Gomez Farias to the Mexican people. Fellow citizens, we present to the civilized world two facts, which, while they will cover with eternal glory the Federal army and the heroic inhabitants of this capital, will hand down with execration and infamy to all future generations the name of General Bustamante, this man, without faith, breaking his solemnly pledged word, after being put at liberty by an excess of generosity, for having promised to take immediate steps to bring about a negotiation of peace, upon the honourable basis which was proposed to him. He is now converted into the chief of an army, the enemy of the Federalists, and has beheld, with a serene countenance, this beautiful capital destroyed, a multitude of families drowned in tears, and the death of many citizens, not only of the combatants, but of those who have taken no part in the struggle. Amongst these must be counted an unfortunate woman enceinte, who was killed as she was passing the palace gates under the belief that a parley having come from his camp, the firing would be suspended, as in fact it was on our side. This government, informed of the misfortune, sent for the husband of the deceased, and ordered $25 to be given him. But the unfortunate man, though plunged in grief, declared that 12 were sufficient to supply his wants. Such was the horror inspired by the atrocious conduct of the ex government of Bustamante, that this sentiment covered up and suffocated all the others. Another fact of which we shall with difficulty find an example in history is the following. The day that the firing began, being in want of some implements of war, it was necessary to cause an iron case to be opened, belonging to Don Stanislaus Flores, in which he had a considerable sum of money in different coin, besides his most valuable effects. Thus all that the government could do was to make this known to the owner, Señor Flores, in order that he might send a person of confidence to take charge of his interests, making known what was wanting, that he might be immediately paid. The pertinacity of the firing prevented Señor Flores from naming a commissioner for 4 days. And then, although the case has been open and no one has taken charge of it, the commissioner has made known officially that nothing is taken from it but the implements of war which were sent for. Glory in yourselves, Mexicans! The most polished nation of the earth, illustrious France, has not presented a similar fact. The Mexicans possess heroic virtues which will raise them above all the nations in the world. This is the only ambition of your fellow citizen, Valentin Gomez Farias. God, Liberty, and Federalism. Mexico, July 17th, 1840. Besides this, a circular has been sent to all the governments and commandants of the different departments from the palace of the Federal Provisional Government, to this effect. The citizen José Urrea, with the greater part of the garrison of the capital, and the whole population, pronounced early on the morning of this day for the re-establishment of the federal system, adopting in the interim the Constitution of 1824, whilst it is reformed by a Congress which they are about to convoke to that effect, and I having been called, in order that at this juncture I should put myself at the head of the government, communicate it to your Excellency, informing you at the same time that the object of the citizen Urrea, instead of re-establishing the federal system, has been to reunite all the Mexicans, by proclaiming toleration of all opinions, and respect for the lives, properties, and interests of all. God, Liberty, and Federalism. Valentin Gomez Farias. National Palace of Mexico, 15th July, 1840. 18th. There is a great scarcity of provisions in the centre of the city, as the Indians who bring in everything from the country are stopped. We have laid in a good stock of comestibles, though it is very unlikely that any difficulties will occur in our direction. While I am writing, the cannon are roaring almost without interruption, and the sound is anything but agreeable, though proving the respect entertained by Farias for the lives, properties, and interests of all. We see the smoke, but are entirely out of the reach of the fire. I had just written these words, when the Señora , who lives opposite, called out to me that a shell has just fallen in her garden, and that her husband had but time to save himself. The cannon directed against the palace kill people in their beds in streets entirely out of that direction, while this ball, intended for the citadel, takes its flight to San Cosme. Both parties seem to be fighting the city instead of each other, and this manner of firing from behind parapets and from the top of houses and steeples is decidedly safer for the soldiers than for the inhabitants. It seems also a novel plan to keep up a continual cannonading by night, and to rest during a great part of the day. One would think that were the guns brought nearer the palace, the affair would be sooner over. Late last night a whole family came here for protection. The Señora with nurse and baby, etc. She had remained very quietly in her own house, in spite of broken windows, till the bullets whizzed past her baby's bed. This morning everything remains as it was the first day, the president in the citadel, the rebels in the palace. The government are trying to hold out until troops arrive from Puebla. In an interval of firing, the secretary contrived to make his way here this morning. The English minister's house is also filled with families, it being a little out of the line of fire. Those who live in the square and in the Calle San Francisco are most exposed, and the poor shopkeepers in the Parian are in a state of great and natural trepidation. I need not say that the shops are all shut. 19th. Dr. Plan, a famous French physician, was shot this morning as he was coming out of the palace, and his body has just been carried past our door into the house opposite. The Señorita , having imprudently stepped out on her balcony, her house being in a very exposed street, a pistol ball entered her side and passed through her body. She is still alive, but it seems impossible that she can recover. The prior of San Joaquin, riding by just now, stopped below the windows to tell us that he fears we shall not remain long here in safety, as the pronunciados have attacked the convent of La Concepción at the end of the street. My writing must be very desultory. Impossible to fix one's attention on anything. We pass our time on the balconies listening to the thunder of the cannon, looking at the different parties of troops riding by, receiving visitors who, in the intervals of the firing, venture out to bring us the last reports, wondering, speculating, fearing, hoping, and excessively tired of the whole affair. Gomez Farias, the prime mover of this revolution, is a distinguished character, one of the notabilities of the country, and has always maintained the same principles, standing up for rapid and radical reform. He is a native of Guadalajara, and his literary career is said to have been brilliant. He is also said to be a man of an ardent imagination and great energy. His name has appeared in every public event. He first aided in the cause of independence, then, when deputy for Zacatecas, showed much zeal in favour of Yturbide, was afterwards a warm partisan of the federal cause, contributed to the election of General Victoria, afterwards to that of Pedraza, took an active part in the political changes of '33 and '34. Detests the Spaniards, and during his presidency endeavoured to abolish the privileges of the clergy and troops, suppressed monastic institutions, granted absolute liberty of opinion, abolished the laws against the liberty of the press, created many literary institutions, and whatever were his political errors, and the ruthlessness with which, in the name of liberty and reform, he marched to the attainment of his object, without respect for the most sacred things, he is generally allowed to be a man of integrity, and even by his enemies, an enthusiast who deceives himself as much as others. Now, in the hopes of obtaining some uncertain and visionary good, and even while declaring his horror of civil war and bloodshed, He has risen in rebellion against the actual government, and is the cause of the cruel war now raging, not in the open fields, or even in the